going to let everyone know that, this is the second series of our webinar. And then coming up tomorrow, we have Stephanie Robinson, who is the wine trainer at Restaurant Associate Group, which is one of the biggest catering group as well. And then on the 29th, which is Wednesday to Thursday, we have Chantal, and who is working for Spirit Cartel and in spirit sales. So it will be quite interesting to talk to her and about her experience as well. And then do not miss, also on Monday, the 4th of May, which is next Monday at 2 o'clock, we have Champagne Bureau's director, Françoise Perotti. So she will be introducing, some two very interesting topics about champagne. Okay, so yeah, that's enough from me. And so once again, so my name is Leona De Pasquale. I am the wine training manager for WineEd. And so today we are really happy to invite Georgia Billing, who is currently the general manager for City of London Distillery, so part of Hellwood Group. And we are going to, she will be talking to us about her experience and her passion about cocktails and spirits. I think she has loads of amazing stories. Okay, so Georgia, Georgia, over to you. Just tell us about where you are working and a bit of your background, and then we'll be asking a few more questions in between. Okay.
Fine. Okay, well, hi everyone. Thank you, Leona, for having me. Thanks everyone for joining me. There's a couple of names and faces I'm familiar with, so lovely to see some of you again as well. So yeah, I'm Georgia. I'm the General Manager at City of London Distillery and Bar. We are the only gin distillery located within the City of London postcode within that area. Considering historically that was the centre of gin production and gin making during the days of the gin craze 200 years ago. The gin back then wasn't really as the gin we know it today. It was quite a bad quality spirit. It was full of impurities. It was making a lot of people sick, probably full of methylated spirits. Production side not very regulated at all. So the government had to step in 200 years ago with a series of gin acts to start regulating the production and the consumption of gin as a matter of public health. And that and kind of put a nail in the coffin of all of the gin production overnight. A lot of the big producers were the survivors of the gin craze, brands we know and love today like Boodles, Booths, Tanqueray and so on. But yeah, 200 years later, we've got 2009, a change in the law, where Gordon Brown once again made it possible for smaller batch distilleries to start producing gin again, or any kind of spirit. It was originally intended to help the craft whiskey movement, but applied to every spirit, including us. So I think Sipsmith, another well-known brand, they were the first to take advantage of this new law. So smaller batch gin production could begin again. And then we came in 2012, 3 years after that, and we were the first distillery to reopen in the area, bringing gin production back to its original home, back to the centre of London. And we're still the only distillery there now. We're currently making 9 gins. We have 3 pot stills. We've got a 600 litre still called Elizabeth, and our 2 original pot stills, Clarissa and Jennifer. We call them the 2 fat ladies. They are our 2 original pot stills. So we're quite a small operation. We've got a bar as well. It fits about 100 seats. And but yeah, considering we're in this little basement, you kind of walk past the door. It's very easy to miss. But now, yeah, you all know where we are. So I hope to see you in the bar when things get back to normal-ish. So yeah, should I go into how I got there?
Yeah, so a bit about yourself. You have very, very interesting background. So I will let you introduce yourself.
All right. So yeah, feel free to interrupt at any time. So my first degree, so I grew up in Cardiff, first of all. So I think my first bartending ventures started there. And then I moved to London for my first degree, which happened to be in archaeology. And I ended up doing a master's as well in skeletal and dental archaeology. Living the student life. My first bar job was in a pub just to get some beer money to drink my way through uni, but in a very responsible way, I hasten to add. in a pub that's still there in Euston Square. But I found that I really had an affinity for it. I loved it. I liked meeting lots of people over the bar, and it was a nice alternative to my academic life, what I was doing at university, studying history, studying archaeology, studying skeletons, and especially like the history of London as well, which has kind of brought me into learning about the history of gin and the history of spirits. So that kind of respect for our past and what we can learn from our past, and learning from our mistakes and other people's mistakes and other people's experiences, and bringing that to our own experiences and developing and, you know, personal development from there on. So yeah, my first bar job was there, and I always had a bar job on the side when I was studying. Doing an archaeology degree appealed to me because I was traveling a lot. I went around the world for archaeological digs. I was really lucky to do some work in Peru, to do some work in Argentina, in Belize, South Africa, Egypt, and of course, excavations and digs in the UK as well. But wherever I went, there was always this personal curiosity, not just in the work that I was doing, but also in the food and drink, you know, the local food and drink, the local culture, the local flavors, the local produce, the local markets, you know, what kind of foods, fruits and vegetables, and even booze, and how the alcohol developed historically over time. So when we were in Egypt, we were learning about, you know, Egyptian bread making and wine making and beer making, and like the history of you know, all of those products as well. In Peru, we were drinking original pisco sours. We went to a very traditional pisco distillery. And then in Belize, it was all about the rum. South Africa, some like beautiful wine, amarula liqueur. And there really is some kind of booze-related product over, you know, history and the history of the people there as well. And that was always like a sideline. When I came back to the UK, I did like a bit of traveling after my archaeology degree, came back to the UK and got accepted for a PhD at the University of Cambridge. And this was a little bit out of my comfort zone, very, very different from the kinds of things I'd done before. I'd always been working in bars, and it was quite intensive to be in Cambridge at that time, and academic life in Cambridge was not like anything I'd experienced before. It does take over your life to do a PhD, if anyone is considering that. It leaves you very little personal time. I've seen like some head shaking. Very little personal time. The reason I wanted to do it was to learn, mainly. Like a PhD is a research and it's a training, it's a contribution to science as well. And my PhD was learning all about different kinds of milk, especially human breast milk. So I did a lot of work in a laboratory analyzing breast milk and learning about milk and what milk was, and studying milks of all different animals. And then I was lucky enough to do some laboratory work in Cork. So got to learn a little bit about Irish whiskey while I was there. It was a bit of opportunistic endeavors. And I also got to work in the Gambia. And so we were studying the different populations of you know, the mothers and infants working in the Gambia and living in Cambridge as well. During that time, I wanted to stay somehow working in the bar industry. It was a period of trying to live a double life. It was something that I wasn't really ready to let go, even though that was the direction I was taking academically, was to end up working in science in some way. But the way that I was able to keep up with my bartending endeavors was to stay within the network, to keep up to date in that side of things. I took some part-time jobs in nightclubs. That didn't work out so well because I was doing 9 to 5 in the lab, and then 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the nightclub weekends. So that was a little bit soul destroying. So I had to give that up. But then I started a little side project, which was a bit of opening up a new experience of running, kind of a taste of running my own business in a way, but it never was really intended for that goal. It was just to keep my hand in bartending, and that was my little cocktail workshop venture called Dipsomania. And I was teaching cocktails and spirits tastings and running these little workshops for students in Cambridge. I was the bar representative for my college bar and developing the spirits and the back bar and that side of things, and events. And I think Cambridge during the summertime, it's a wonderful time because there's a lot of garden parties and summer parties and June events and May balls, and they're always looking for bartenders and event bars and interesting cocktail menus. And it was a way that I could keep up with the bar industry without having to give it up entirely. I got my degree, fast forward, and I spent a year writing my thesis, which was quite a low time. I was stuck behind a desk. While I loved the field work and the laboratory work, I didn't like being behind a desk and looking at spreadsheets and writing day in, day out, but there was a year of that. And then after I passed and everything, I decided that I couldn't lead this double life anymore. It was not becoming sustainable. I think to truly follow your passion and develop it like on a deeper level, for me anyway, I had to concentrate on it fully. So something had to give, and I had to kind of go forward as well. So that was an important lesson for me. I couldn't come back to London, you know, jump straight into a bar job. I was applying to all of the high profile bars. Of course, no one would take me. I didn't have the right kind of experience for that. But I did have to go back. I had to retrain as a bartender to be, you know, competitive in London. So I started as a bar back at a bar in East London, and I was lucky enough to be given an opportunity there. And within about 6 months, I'd managed to work my way up. Luckily, with the PhD behind me, I knew how to study. So I was full of transferable skills, things like presentation skills, research skills, critical thinking, all of these sorts of things that I'd, you know, managed to learn during that time. I think definitely stood me in good stead. Within 6 months, I'd worked my way up to an assistant general manager position. Wrote a couple of cocktail menus in collaboration with the general manager at the time. And that was a wonderful experience. And I think my heart was set on it then, that this was where the path, you know, this was the path that I wanted. This is what I was going to take. And funnily enough, I thought back to what my parents did, and they owned and ran their own fish and chip shop when I was growing up. So I think even that, having that background, growing up in a catering hospitality environment, not being afraid of a little bit of hard work. I really enjoy working with my hands as well, and that was definitely something I missed in that year of thesis writing. So I kind of decided that that was where I wanted to go. My future was in hospitality. The reason why I enjoy it so much is because I think people don't realize that hospitality is like one of the most fastest growing industries in the UK. It's not really considered as a legitimate career when I think it should be. And I don't think people realize the amount of opportunities there are. I think people just think, oh, it's just waitressing or just bartending or just bar backing, but that's where you start. You have this opportunity to get into management if you want, get into ownership if you want, looking at brand ambassador or sales development, or becoming like starting your own brand or starting your own bar. And it's the way that, you know, those opportunities that you can work up to, that it's not, I think, as narrow as some people are led to believe.
That's great. And so, I mean, you mentioned that your parents, you know, owned a fish and chip shop. Is it? And well, so see, in our student life, we'll choose different kind of like part-time job. You know, some people go for retail, some people do like teaching and all that. So, you know, what was that? You know, was that bar job? Was your first student job, and why was that?
Well, it was this. I think I've been incredibly lucky to be able to explore a lot of my interests. So I always loved history, and that's why I got into archaeology. But then I wanted to work in a bar as well. And it just so happened that there was an opportunity came up, that the bar that was closest to my house that I used to go drinking in were looking for staff. So I thought, oh, it'd be good for me to have a part-time job on the side. And I ended up doing these student events as well. And it was a lucky strike, I think. I fell into it and I loved it. And every bar that I worked in since then was another type of bar that gave me another kind of skill. So that was starting off in a pub. Then I started in a cocktail bar. Then it was a restaurant bar. Then it was, a hostel and like kind of hotel atmosphere bar. And each one gave me something different. I was learning a new system. It was a different kind of team. It was a different kind of operation. And there was always something to be taken away from it. And I didn't really have any, I think, curiosity about any other kind of job. I think there were a lot of other opportunities as well. Like some of my friends were working in part-time in telesales or waitressing. But for me, it was always, no, I want to learn more about this profession. And perhaps it was growing up in that environment.
Yeah. So then when you are actually after you finish your PhD, when you are looking for going back to the bar thing, do you when people are looking at your CV, will they say that, oh, you're overqualified, or what's the impression? Okay, you have a PhD in Cambridge. What's people's the HR managers' reaction when they talk to you?
Well, I think you certainly don't need a doctorate to be a bartender, but there are things that I learned during my doctorate that help me now in my job as a general manager. And there are certainly those kind of experiences that I exposed myself to that helped me then and helped me now. I was lucky enough to be working with a general manager then. He's actually on this call, Michele Reina, and he was a curious bartender, wanted to learn more about the chemistry side of booze. And I think we made kind of a deal at the time. He was going to tell me everything about the back bar, and I would share with him what I'd learned on the food science side of my PhD. And we started this small company together, making our own bitters and liqueurs and vermouths and things like cocktail ingredients. And we ran with that for a couple of years, and that's dormant at the moment as well. But running that business was an eye-opener too, because there was like all of the HMRC side and the admin side, and not just the fun making liqueurs. There's a lot of size to it. There's a lot of aspects to it, and if you don't try and take something away from it, then you'll never know. And that business is there ready to be picked up again when we're ready to. And we certainly learned a lot from it. In terms of the qualification, it was a great thing to do. It was a wonderful experience. It was really, really tough as well. But as I just mentioned, there were a lot of transferable skills that I gained from that experience, such as presentation skills, which helps me in my job today. Like part of our job is running these gin distillery tours and tasting events where you're up talking in front of about 20 people about gin for an hour, and having the confidence to do that was definitely something that helps. And things like writing skills, if you're writing something for the website, or critical thinking, all of this kind of research skills, questioning, asking the right question, being curious and being in that environment. Again, it's not a doctorate isn't something that you necessarily need, but there are skills that I gained for it that certainly helped.
So as a GM in the, a gin distillery, is there a normal day? What is a normal day?
There's not a normal day. There's a lot of moving parts. What I really love about our distillery is that we have such a small but very diverse team. So we have our head distiller, Guy Martin, who's in from about 7 o'clock every day, and then his day will finish at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But that's when our bar team are just beginning to come in and start opening the bar. So you have the nightlife of the distillery as well, which is the bar, and then the distillery during the day. We have our retail shop where people can buy a bottle of gin and take it home with them after they've tried it. And we have our experiences that we run as well. So these distillery tours and gin tastings, as well as these experiences where people can make their own gin as well. So we guide them through choosing their botanicals and distilling it themselves on a little 1 litre size pot still. So there's a lot of moving parts to keep all of those various departments running smoothly. I wouldn't say there's necessarily a normal day, but I get to see everyone during the day. So if I come in like at about 9 in the morning, you know, the distiller's there, our operations manager is already dealing with, you know, the ins and outs of the distillery and the high proof spirits, you know, driving the forklift truck or whatever. We're down a very small lane, and we have a very small opening to get the high proof spirits in and out. So like the van just about squeezes down the lane, the pallet just about squeezes onto the truck, just about squeezes down like the lift, down the goods lift, and it's all yeah, a very intricate operation. But it works, and it's amazing like how much gin we produce. You know, we produce like thousands of bottles a day with all 3 stills running, considering how small we are and how tricky it can be.
Yeah, I've been to your place a few times, and yeah, it's really, really tiny. You're really going to miss it if you don't look for it.
Oh yeah. I think the first time I went there, I walked past it. It's just a door on the street, and you go down. It opens up into this huge
Exactly.
bar and this little distillery, and people come down, and it's a little bit dark down there, and your eyes need to adjust a little bit, and people say, oh, do you make your gin down here? And you say, yeah, the distillery's right there, and they look behind and they're really surprised. Oh, it is there. Yeah. And they say, oh, but this is just for show, isn't it? You don't really make the gin here. It's like, no, we're fully operational 5 days a week.
Yeah,
continue to be the case, you know,
so it is really, really
grow.
Yeah, and I also know about, as a GM, and also you previously as a bar manager, you also recruit. I mean, you are involved in dealing with recruitment. So for anyone who is looking into get into a really creative bartender job or something like working in a distillery, what sort of like, what do you think? Qualification wise or experience wise or personality wise, you know, what will you be looking for?
So when I've been lucky enough to be sitting on the other side of interviews. So definitely being interviewed definitely gives you that kind of experience of what to look for when you're on the other side and interviewing someone else. So I think whether or not I've ended up getting the job from those various experiences, you definitely take something away from the experience of even being interviewed. So like my interview style, if I'm interviewing a bartender in front of me, is a little bit of everything from the people that have interviewed me. And I'll look for not always something similar to myself, but certainly a curiosity. A curiosity of history and science, because that's what working in the City of London distillery is. You've got the historical side, and then you've got the scientific side of the distillation process in as much detail as you want to go into, in as much detail as you want to learn as well. So definitely a curious mind, and somebody, that's not afraid of hard work. It's it's like attitude is key. It is hard work. You're on your feet for very long hours. You have to get your hands dirty from time to time. But so being able to coordinate working with your brain and working with your hands, and if you show that you have a curious mind and you're not afraid to be humble, and you might have to go back to go forward as well. So sometimes people come, they're looking for bar supervisor positions or head bartenders. We might only have a bartender position open, but the good thing about even working for a company like Halewood, even though we have this feeling of being in a small bar, we've got the support of a bigger entity, which is Halewood, and the doors that can open as well. Like progression can be very, very fast, depending on yourself and how you drive yourself as well. So like Halewood has all kinds of positions, open brand ambassadors, sales managers, other distilleries, bigger distilleries. They're an international company as well. So the opportunity for travel. So even if you're not afraid to step down to go eventually forward, then it's another plus, I guess.
Yeah.
But recruitment's such a gamble.
And the last question from me, before I open, the Q&A to anyone, you must have been asked about these questions thousands of times. What is your favorite cocktail and why?
It depends. I think the world of spirits is so vast, it can change a lot. But it depends. I guess I can tell you about my favorite cocktail right now would probably be something very simple. Like it's, you know, it's beautiful weather we're having lately. It's spring, it's nearly summer. So something like an Aperol Spritz or an aperitif style. Gin and tonic, can't go wrong. But probably my most favorite cocktail, like if I'm in a nice cocktail bar, I'd always ask for some kind of sour, something with an egg white, lemon juice, something quite simple, but you can feel the spirit. You know, I love a pisco sour, love a gin sour. And there's always something new to discover, I think. And that's the other beauty about this industry is that you can get so into spirits as a category, get so into one kind of spirit. So for example, I'm learning all about gin now, but I used to work for a vodka brand. I've worked with whiskey brands in the past. I've done some competitions where you start delving into the details of individual brands and productions. And then you meet people like yourself that are, you know, experts on wine. And, you know, I've got a lot to learn about wine. And there's always going to be something new and something more diverse and something always, yes, like something else that's going to be open to exploration. So I hope that answers your question. There's no answer to that question. Any bartender will tell you that.
It is always a difficult question, you know, when people ask me what's your favorite wine, for example.
And, without sounding too much like an alcoholic, yeah, it's a problem. In moderation, for sure.
Of course, yeah. Right, so I think that's everything I need to ask Georgia. And then if anyone wanted to ask any question, this is the opportunity. And okay, I'm going to unmute everyone. If you don't want me to unmute you, you can mute you back. Okay. And if you wanted to ask questions, you can just yeah.
It's always me. It's always me. Sorry. Hi, Georgia.
Hello. Hi.
A very quick question. I'm like Leona, very much into my wines, so I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to spirits. Obviously, you can get faulty wines. Can you get faulty spirits?
Say that again. What can you get for the wines?
Is it possible to get faulty spirits as well?
Faulty?
Yeah, faulty.
Faulty spirits. Oh, I think once a spirit is made and it's bottled, it's going to change much over time. I think it would have to take many decades for that spirit to change because of the alcohol content. It's going to be a lot more stable than something like a wine, especially if it's been bottled. You haven't let the air get to it. It hasn't, you know, been able to evaporate. I think the change that you will see, if you keep it for 10 years, I'd say that if it's going to get faulty or change at all, it's going to be negligible. But if you look at a spirit and you look at it in the bottle, you can't see any sediments or crystals. I think it's going to stay very stable. I think that faults can happen at the bottling stage. Sometimes I've seen spirits that it seems to have some kind of particles inside. And I think if there are solid particles in there, then that would contribute over time to it becoming faulty. But if it's been bottled and it's clear and the air can't get to it, I think it's going to be, it's decades before that anything's going to change. But I think you might have to talk to an actual whiskey maker or spirits maker. I think the spirits don't usually last too long in many households. I started learning a little bit about this. So do you know Specialty Drinks? So they're a big distributor and they deal a lot with vintage spirits and vintage vermouths and vintage aperitifs. So it might be worth asking them what they think. So they'd certainly have a lot more experience in vintage spirits where you may see some faults occur over time. But at the bottling stage, I think it's very rare to find a fault in a spirit compared to a wine. That would be my first take on it. I don't know if that helps at all.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I know, Michele, you have a question.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I actually mute myself because I'm close to the tube station, and you know it's really loud. So I just wrote it down. Obviously, you know, I know Georgia quite well, and I'm her biggest fan. But you know, we kind of been working close together in different occasions. You know, I should mention as well, we had our company as well. But I have my opinion of what, you know, we saw in the last 5 years changing in the industry, and you know, I wanted to know you know, her opinion, what, you know, what she saw changing about bartender wise, you know, brand wise, the way that people compete or present themselves, and you know, how she personally changed as well, you know, during those years.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in the last 5 years, I think, well, I've been working in the industry for a good 15 years now. I think when I started, there was like these disco drinks were really popular. You know, lots of blue curacao and grenadine and passion fruit and things. I'm not sure if that's just the age that I was or the actual trend in bartending scene at the time. I've certainly, I think, become a bit more refined in my tastes. I've learned to appreciate things that I hated before. For example, I didn't really have much of an affinity with absinthe, but managed to get a good education on absinthe from Ted Bro himself when he visited London. So that was definitely a newfound respect for a spirit that I didn't like before. But I think it's the classic example of you just say you don't like it without really knowing about it. And I think that's a way that I might have changed over the years, in terms of just rather than just deciding, oh, you know, trying something and deciding that you hate it, at least having the curiosity to find out a bit more about it in time. And giving it a chance as well, and then trying a few different kinds and developing an opinion afterwards. I'm definitely seeing, yeah, I don't know if you agree or not, a trend in lower alcohol serves, so things like vermouth heavy cocktails or sherry heavy, and a bit more of an appreciation for those kinds of products in mixers as cocktails as well. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. So I've definitely used my background in nutrition and food science in learning about those products. And I think we should be really careful about talking about health in terms of alcohol, because of course alcohol and health don't really go hand in hand, but certainly people are becoming a lot more mindful about the quality and the quantity of drinks they're consuming. And I know there's a lot of research being done, I think, on the scientific side as well. I think there's a group of a scientific group in Denmark that are looking a lot into drinking habits and what people buy, and also the foods that they buy with the certain types of booze. So what kind of food do wine drinkers buy? What kind of food do beer drinkers buy? As well as the quantity and the quality and the associated circulatory diseases. So there's certainly a trend for, I think, more mindful drinking, or doing it in a bit more of a responsible way, which is not a bad thing at all. In terms of how bartenders might have changed in the last 5 years, I'm not an expert. I think there'll always be the passionate bartenders. I'm seeing probably a little bit more impatience in bartenders. I think the people that we hired in the last few years, like in those bars that I started working in after my PhD, were a bit more willing to explore themselves, work hard, and make mistakes. Whereas now I think you've got these big competitions, and they're always really impressive in these opportunities to travel. And bartending and social media, the social media aspect is getting very easy for people to make a name for themselves. And I think there's definitely an impatience of, why not me? Why not me yet? And I think, probably people could, I think bartenders could probably be a little bit more patient with themselves and compare to each other a lot less. But I don't know if you agree with that.
Thank you. And we have another question from Giancarlo. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, so hi Giancarlo. So we are only producing gin at the moment. We do have a column still on our site, so if we do want to start producing a vodka in the future, we certainly can do, but I don't think Halewood has any plans to do that yet, but it's certainly a possibility. But yes, we do. We're only doing gin. We do produce an Old Tom gin, which is very nice. It's quite a traditional style. So Old Tom gin as a style of gin was quite heavily spiced and had a bit of sugar in it to kind of mask the flavor of that bad quality spirit back in the days of the gin craze. Of course, the quality of the spirit now is much improved, but we've stuck to the traditional heavy spice style, touch of sugar, just to create that creamy texture that's very different from a London dry style of gin, but definitely a lot of winter spice like cinnamon coming through on an Old Tom. Definitely give it a try if you see it around. We're not making Geneva yet, but we do stock some Geneva in our bar because we talk about Geneva a lot as kind of the grandma or grandpa of gin, the kind of juniper family spirit. So we talk about Geneva a lot in our history when we're doing our distillery tours. So if anyone that's attending those tours are interested in trying Geneva, we do keep some on the bar for people to have a little taste of it afterwards. And yes, I think when we're going to reopen, we're certainly open to hiring new bartenders. I can share my email with you afterwards, and you can certainly pass your CV over. And thank you very much for your interest.
That's great. Anyone has got any more questions before we say bye to each other? Okay.
I like a challenge.
And if you have, if you feel a little bit shy at the moment, or you have any questions later on, you can always email back, or Georgia is in LinkedIn as well, and I believe you can. There's always way to find her, and now just thank you everyone. And
I've got one there from Chantal.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, just very quickly, we're not doing specific distillation courses. However, if you're interested in distillation, I strongly suggest you do our gin lab making experience. So you can choose your botanicals and distill it yourself. And I think that would be a really good start into learning a bit more about, the distillation as a step-by-step process. And you get to name your gin and take a bottle home with you as well. So that's certainly something we'll be starting up again when we reopen, hopefully soon.
Yeah. All right, so fingers crossed that we can go back to the normal as soon as possible, and
hopefully soon. Yeah, and I hope everybody's well and staying safe and staying at home and washing their hands.
All right. Oh, there is another question. Can you share a link?
A link to our website. So our distillery website is just cityoflondondistillery.com, and it'll have all of the experiences, the information there on our gin tours and gin labs when they're going to be ready to start again. Otherwise, if you can't find the information on there, there's the inquiries email, inquiries at cityoflondondistillery.com, and we'll certainly get back to you even now.
All right, that's great. Okay, so no more questions? Last chance. All right, so thank you so much, and thank you for everyone spending the 40 minutes with us, and thank you especially for Georgia as well, and to share all the experience.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this session will be recorded. If anyone wanted to share with someone else, I will share the link to YouTube as well. So if you wanted to share with your friends who are like passionate about cocktail, or trying to figure out should he or should she become a bartender, I think this will be a good video to share. All right, so thank you very much, and stay safe, and have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.